Hello, I'm Nancy Bates, Mayor of the City of Farmington Hills, Michigan. During my 25 years of public service, I have learned firsthand the importance of involving young people in decision making. I'm honored to serve as a board member of the National League of Cities Institute for Youth, Education, and Families, and I firmly believe that young people are ready and willing to offer their opinions and service to the local governments. They only have to be convinced that adults welcome their participation. Youth as community leaders, youth as community assets, youth as community resources. These words create powerful images in our minds, but how can we create an environment in which these images become a powerful reality? Youth advisory councils may be the answer. They're quickly developing in cities across the nation. Communities like Farmington Hills have had youth delegates serving on various boards and commissions for some time. But research shows that in order to get a true youth perspective on any issue, young people need to discuss the issue with their peers in a manner and place that's comfortable for them. And that's the challenge that's driving the formation of youth advisory councils. Young people are a dynamic force. They have energy, intellect, curiosity, opinions, and courage. They also have dreams and hopes, ambition, and futures filled with promise. They are the leaders of tomorrow. While these young people are still in high school age, we need to talk with them, to listen to them, and to act on their suggestions. Youth advisory councils offer a forum where young people's thoughts and ideas can be heard and acted upon. They help youth to experience ownership for what happens in their community by allowing them to be a vital force in making it happen. Youth advisory councils represent an exciting step forward for young people across the country, an innovative new concept actively encouraged by the National League of Cities and the Michigan Municipal League. Youth advisory councils help municipal officials develop youth as leaders, develop strong families, and create family-friendly communities. In Farmington Hills, we're calling it 2020 Perfect Vision, because the year 2020 is when today's young people will be in charge. We need to connect them to the government now, to engage them in the process so they will be responsible adult citizens. We need to do skill building, to encourage them to vote when they are 18, to involve them in community volunteerism, and to listen to them, to invest in their hopes and dreams, those that they have for their community and their country. Our youth need and want to be regarded as community assets. The City of Farmington Hills has an active youth program that serves as a national model, and we're currently developing a youth advisory council. In August of 2000, I hosted a two-day Youth as Leaders workshop attended by elected officials, staff, and young people from 18 communities in South Oakland County and the City of Detroit. Experts from the National League of Cities and the Council for Michigan Foundations met with us to discuss steps needed to establish youth advisory councils in communities throughout Michigan. There is enormous advantage in having several youth councils begin simultaneously. The synergy created when talented young people's minds begin collaborating and cooperating on this project is very exciting to watch. This video features a wealth of information from the Farmington Hills workshop. During the next hour, you will discover how youth advisory councils can make a positive impact in our cities, and how you can begin the journey to establishing a successful youth advisory council in your own community. Our goal is to answer the many questions you may have. Why your community needs a youth council, how youth advisory councils differ from student councils in schools, how to form your own youth council, who should be invited to join, and what are the benefits to the young people and the community. We will also offer examples of successful youth councils that have already been established across our country to serve as models.
Youth councils can be whatever your community needs it to be. A lot of times you may be looking to have young people involved in the decision-making process of your community. That's what we've done here in Farmington Hills. And other places around the country have utilized their young people in a lot of different ways. They're a great resource to take advantage of having in your community. A lot of times we tap a lot of sources throughout our community, but a lot of times we do forget our youth. Youth councils can help your community by giving you advice on some of the issues that might be dealing with youth. You may need to use them in their way of saying, this is what we think, this is our opinion, so take value in it.
I'm here to make a difference and to finally have a say in my future, because for so long, at least in West Bloomfield, the decisions for what the youth thinks is fun or what the youth find entertaining have always been made by the adults there. And oftentimes, not to be rude to any adults sitting in this room, I respect you all greatly, but they don't know. And we always end up, they'll plan like tea parties, you know, like weird stuff like that. And in West Bloomfield, really, there's not much entertainment there, because unlike our neighboring cities, we don't have a downtown. We don't have a central area where everybody can meet at a fountain and then decide what they want to do and hang out. You give me 4 walls and a roof and I would be set in West Bloomfield. It would be fine for me, anything. And I think there was another question, like what activities do I need to do? Seriously, give me 4 walls and like a bucket of paint and some chairs and I would be set with my friends for hours on end.
It occurred to us that there was a consistent, at least one constituency that we weren't representing in those various groups or in various other ways, and that was youth. And that important components of the citizenry, you know, the citizens, the public in every city and town in America isn't just the adults who live there, but it's also the folks who aren't considered adults, no matter what age you might call them. But especially if they're under voting age. So we began to think about what could we do, and could we encourage this? Could we provide a constituency for that within the National League of Cities? Was it appropriate for us to do that? We started 2 years ago in 1998 to have these ideas and thoughts, and could we bring youth into the organization? If they weren't elected officials, were there reasons to do that? We thought there were a variety of reasons. One is that we wanted youth to, as Nancy talked about at the beginning, to be able to serve as members of municipal government hopefully in the very near future. Young men and women who are 15, 16, 17, 18 years old could be serving office within a couple of years if they chose to do so and could get elected. In fact, it's not unheard of for, I think the youngest mayor in America right now is 20 in upstate New York. So there have been 18-year-old council members in states in the Midwest, I think in Kansas.
We have diversity training and open-mindedness. Diversity and open-mindedness is very important, especially when you're in a leader role, because you're going to have so many different types of people from different communities, different races and nationalities. You're going to need to be able to talk to those people and get something from everybody, different ideas to make one thing come together to have something great.
One reason for having youth as part of our constituency was that we wanted to make sure that youth understood municipal government and were wanting to be involved in it and could be productive contributors to civic life and municipal government, not just be successful and productive as individuals and in their families and in their jobs, but also could have the opportunities to choose service in elected capacities or appointed capacities in municipal government. The other reason we thought that we wanted youth as participants in the National League of Cities was that they had good ideas. They had ideas and programs and plans that adults might not come up with. Sometimes they're very much in sync. Sometimes they're very different and diverse. Sometimes that's because of age, sometimes it's because of culture, sometimes just because of it's a different brain functioning on this issue. And that we were missing out if we didn't include youth in what we were doing.
It should be as committed as the kids, because as teens or as youth, we don't have the power that an adult has. So they can't just say they're going to help us. They have to be really involved in actually helping us, because words are one thing, but actions are another.
We're trying to put youth into the places where the discussions about what's good for the National League of Cities, and as a result, what we hope is good for America's cities and towns, putting youth into those discussions, at the board of directors level, at the Council on Youth Education and Families, at our national conferences, places where discussions are going on, policy is being made. But we're also seeing cities and towns all over the country thinking, as you're thinking, wouldn't a youth council be a good idea? Wouldn't having youth participate in our municipal government be a good idea? It ranges from questions like, can I put youth on all of the councils that we've got? You know, on the Historic Commission, on the Library Board, on the School Board, on the Zoning Commission. There's some places that are doing it that way. They think they can get more youth involved if they do it that way. One of the things that we discovered, I think we knew it from the beginning, but the young people today, I'm sure, will confirm it, but they've been confirming it with all of our National League of Cities meetings on an ongoing way, is that what adults may think is a youth issue may not be a youth issue to youth. Youth have as many diverse kinds of issues as adults do. We found youth going to the workshops on environmental protection. It's not a youth issue in my mind. I'm a youth specialist. That's not a youth issue. The youth have told me and taught me that it is a youth issue. So the cities that have looked at having youth on various boards are perhaps going in a healthy direction because they're allowing the youth to participate in the ways that are most important to them, which isn't necessarily only about the things for youth or programs for youth or activities for youth. That's only a part of what youth are interested in. We see councils that are only composed of youth. So the youth council means just that. It's a council of youth. And we see youth councils that have, strangely enough, no youth on them. We want to start a youth council in our city, and they have no youth on it. And then we see others, much more typically, that have some mix of adults and youth on the council. They range from having authority over money, authority over their own money, but nobody else's, input into the budget, allocating funds to groups, providing advice, participating in city council meetings, the chair of the youth council participating in city council meetings, all kinds of variances, all kinds of varieties. It can be what works in that locality. The point is, I think, that the National League of Cities has benefited significantly in how it can help cities because it has, we believe, we have at least tried, and I think succeeded in many ways, by respecting youth.
One of the main reasons young people should get involved is because instead of them complaining about the decisions being made that they don't like, they can actually make a difference. With their input, decisions being made will help them agree with the decisions, and they'll appreciate it a lot more.
There is something to be gained, something to be offered, something to be challenged, that these don't all have to be confrontational or problematic kinds of issues to discuss. But I know that there's some elected officials in different parts of the country who thought, this just isn't a good idea, can't do this, until they met some young people who actually could show off about what they knew, how they could be participants in this kind of democracy, how they could learn from it, but also contribute to it.
To summarize John Kyle's presentation, he tells us the following information. Number one, it's important to involve all young people, not just the top achievers or athletes. 2, seek to recruit young adults at schools, places of worship, and clubs, and ask the school counselors for recommendations. 3, make sure that all participants feel they are equal and that everyone's contributions and ideas are important. And 4, young adults will need certain skills to be successful, including speaking, understanding group dynamics, and learning about city guidelines, codes, and ordinances. And 5, a young adult may feel intimidated if he or she is the only one person appointed to a board or commission. It's important to appoint at least 2 so that each has a buddy, an ally to discuss the issues with.
Youth councils are very important to have because there's a large constituency that remains unrepresented in local government, and that is youth. Many teenagers have things that they want to say, feelings they want to express, but they don't have an open forum, especially of their peers, that they would feel comfortable doing so. A youth council provides that advantage and that ability to get things done and to work with their peers alongside elected officials to make better changes in their community.
About 3 years ago, started introducing high school students on various boards and commissions in the city. The Parks and Recreation Board, the Planning Board, the Historic Board, the Historical District Design and Review Commission, and that has been a very, very successful program. Out of that program also came a group of adults and youth that formed the Community Coalition. And the Community Coalition came to the City of Birmingham. The City Council received endorsement from the City Commission, and the Parks and Recreation Board endorses the coalition. And one of the big activities that came out of that is totally run by youth is what we call our annual, actually we have 2 of them, band jams every year. They have received community service recognition from the Michigan Recreation and Parks Association. Totally run by youth. Bands audition in front of them, submit their tapes. The youth pick who they want to have at the concerts. And the theme of the band jams is to provide an alcohol, tobacco, and drug-free activity.
I think regardless of whether we're talking about programming, as it appears as though you're doing in your community centers, or we're talking about involving young people as decision makers, bringing them to the table with equal voices, you know, we're asking similar kinds of questions. To be a successful programmer, you're going to need to look at youth as a resource. And how can we take advantage of them as an expert to help us develop the kind of programs that are going to be meaningful in their lives? I don't know how many of you are familiar with Search Institute. Can you help me pass these out? Search Institute's an organization out of Minnesota who has literally surveyed thousands and thousands and thousands of young people all over the nation to determine what is it that young people need to help them avoid risky behaviors in their life. And what they found are these 40 developmental assets that are being passed around right now. And the average average high school age young person has less than 18 of these assets. Less than 18. And we have to ask ourselves, you know, what are we doing? And what are our dreams, and how can we, if the more of these assets you have, the less chances are you're going to be involved in risky behavior. How can we help our communities evolve to include more of these assets?
And young people need to have their own organizational structures within the group. So that means not only should there be an adult leader or an entire leader for the entire thing, that you need to have kids who are leaders and have other jobs inside the smaller groups that you could have.
Community values youth. Not just that we're going to put them in a school from 8 to 5 or 8 to 4, because that will keep them busy and keep them occupied, but they value youth as having meaningful input into their communities, meaningful input into the decisions that affect young people's lives. They look at youth as a resource. They have meaningful roles. And as you look up here, I jotted down this morning, meaningful work. As you develop your councils and think about including young people in decision making, it's obviously, if it's a token kind of thing, it's not going to work. So what kind of meaningful kind of opportunities can be created, and the opportunities for young people to be heard and their advice implemented, what kind of those things can be created in your communities?
Can actually have a say in what's happening, and you know you can make a difference if you really believe in it, and you get people and you have a strong argument, then kids will get involved in it, and they'll realize, wow, well, I have a problem with this. Maybe if I get involved, I can change it and make it better for not just me, but a bunch of people. And if they realize that they have that power, then they'll really like it, because kids want to know that they can do something, that they can change something.
This occurs in Paradise, Michigan, that has a K-12 population of 78 young people, to Southeast Michigan. The three things that are always listed are drugs, substance abuse, what are we going to do about that? What are we going to do about sexuality issues? And what are we going to do about nothing to do? The fact that there isn't anything to do. And those tend to be the survey items that keep coming up over and over. So I wasn't real surprised when it said teens need a place to go to and hang out. As you work on establishing these councils, there's a whole lot of surveys that have already been done out there and information that you can take. But I think it would be real interesting if some of you took it a step further and maybe developed some focus groups and got some training so that you could lead a focus group in exploring those issues, exploring those possibilities a little bit further. You know, not just on paper. We know that drug, sex, and rock and roll is a problem. It was a problem when we were kids, right? So it still is. It's still there. You know, it's one of those things that happens. But explore it further. What's the implications of it? You know, why do some people get involved in risky behaviors and other people don't? And how can we, as an advisory group or as a youth group, help more people develop some of those assets we were talking about very briefly that came around just after lunch? So we're thinking about both in terms of short-term and long-term goals. I think as you develop these councils, one of the real important things that happens very, very quickly is that there's something meaningful for that council to do. That there's some sort of hands-on kind of activity that can be done and accomplished within that first year at the minimum. Maybe a survey's it, maybe it's a program, maybe it's doing a spot on a television show. Who knows what it might be? That's up to your creativity. But I think it's real important that you do something hands-on as quickly as possible to get the ball rolling with all this.
In order for youth to stay involved in youth councils, first, that they're being listened to, and second, that they're learning something from the experience as well. And I think that the incentive of giving back to your community, especially your generation, is one of the key ways to keep youth involved in the Youth Council Initiative.
There's 4 things that we've learned about why kids have remained involved in the program. And number 1, it's fun. It's got to be fun. There's more important things to do in a young person's life than sit around at a boring meeting, and there's no need to return if it isn't fun. How many young people in here, and young person, let's identify that as 18 and below. How many of you use planners and calendars to take care of your days? Yeah. Okay, your days are full. You've got things going on. It's not any different than the rest of us. So if your free time isn't going to be fun, and this ought to be free time, then you're probably not going to come back. Secondly, it probably needs to be social. There needs to be opportunities to interact, not just on what do you think we ought to do about the skate park, but also how's your latest report going, Did you get in trouble last night for coming in late, those kind of things. And so, you did? No. Oh, okay. Okay, you're nodding your head. Maybe I caught you. Okay, so it's got to be fun. It's got to be social. The third thing they've told us is that you've got to learn something. I need to learn something if I'm going to remain involved in this group. And it may be learning something about government, it may be learning something about the community, it may be learning something about conflict resolution, it may be learning something about negotiating skills, it may be learning something about on and on and on. But I'm learning something. My time is being used wisely. And the final thing, and these aren't in any order of importance, the final thing is that they always say it's really great to be respected, to be listened to by adults, and to know that I'm making a difference.
It's true. Youth want to make a difference. We want a place where we can gather, where it's fun, sociable, and productive. We want the world to know that we want to make a difference.
By parameters and non-negotiables, I think knowing that there's some laws out there, knowing that there might be some bylaws, knowing that in our case, where young people are granting money, knowing that there's some parameters around how those grants can be made are are real critical in the beginning to know that those are there, so that you don't spend time spinning your wheels trying to get around things that are already in place and have to remain in place. So that's some of the things I meant by that. You might also consider, from a legal perspective, are there any special precautions that you need to take into consideration when you work with young people? And I think there are. Photo releases might be one of them. Waivers and legal disclaimers might be another one. If you have volunteers that are working with young people, I think it's important that you do background checks to make sure you keep your program safe for everybody's protection. So those are some of those things that I think you need to keep in mind as you're considering developing a program such as a Youth Advisory Council.
Young people at this age right now are very tired of complaining about what's going on in our community, and we are ready to make a difference. We're ready to say, okay, we want to get it done, and I think this is the perfect time for it because this generation is so much more excited about it. I have talked to my friends, and all of them are very excited about getting involved and getting things done. So I think this is the perfect time for it.
The guidelines that the Kellogg Foundation gave to us was that they define young person as 13 to 21. And that's a real wide developmental span to work with. Most of our groups have gone to primarily high school age young people. It can be challenging to have that span of middle school, high school, on out of school even, you know. So I think if you're asking for a recommendation, I think what I would consider is at least if you're doing programming both with middle school and below and high school and above, that you have advisory groups that represent those different groups.
When adults, well-meaning adults, work with kids or have the opportunity to work with kids, they immediately think, oh, here's someone who can pick up after the party, who can sit at the registration desk, who can do the gopher tasks. It's a spare hand, and I see this over and over and over again, and my biggest challenge is to get the people that we work with to take a look at these kids and say, here's somebody you need to ask their opinion. You need to ask them to help make decisions. You need to ask them to be leaders.
You are at the leading edge of a movement. You're not behind, but you're not so far out front that nobody else has done it and there's not something you can't learn from. But I think you have a very exciting role to play because people are just beginning to think about this, but they've been thinking about it long enough that there's some ideas for you to use. So I think you need to think about that. Keep that in mind as wow, we've got something new and exciting going on. We're part of something that's going on nationally, that there are resources nationally, there are localities all over the country that you can turn to, cities that are the same size, cities that are smaller, cities that are bigger, programs that are similar, programs that are very different from what you hope to have, because you might learn from any of them. I think I want to start by talking a little bit about the one in Boston because it's getting a lot of attention, and they are a very willing resource to you beyond anything that I may give you in print. The youth council that exists in Boston is the mayor's youth council. It has representatives on it that come from different geographic areas in the city, so it is representational by geography, not just city council districts, I don't believe, but it's not important for our conversation to know exactly how many or how they divided it, but it is geographic. And the members are selected from those geographic areas, so that there are two, going on my theme of yesterday, that there are two from each of those geographic areas at least, so that they've got teammates in those geographical boundaries. They also have a very strong emphasis on the youth selecting the upcoming class of youth council members based on both written applications and oral interviews, and they are group interviews. They meet regularly with the mayor. This is a council that is a youth-only council. It is sponsored in part by Northeastern University, so they've got some staff assistance, some mentoring assistance, and some financial support from a local college. There is a full-time staff member in the mayor's office that's responsible for maintaining the connections and ongoingness of the council. They have done a youth survey. Lots of cities have done surveys. This is one of the more current examples of ones I've seen. This is from 2 or 3 years ago. But it certainly is up for modeling, up for grabs. You know, if you thought that you needed to do a survey in your community, here's an example of one of the kinds of questions that was successfully responded to by the youth in the city of Boston.
What we must do is actually get the kids involved first. The first important step is getting the youth excited and getting the youth ready to make a difference. When that happens, everything will happen after this. When you get the youth involved in this, when you get the youth to set up their constitution for the youth council, when they put their ideas, they think it's theirs. And once they think it's theirs, you have a world of difference rather than having one person, from a government official, deciding everything. So here you are trying to start a youth council. Go to your youth and ask them what do they want and how do they want it, and that's how you make a difference.
You've got a youth council which is youth only, like in Boston. You've got some of the places in California where they've got youth and adults. Some of the councils in Texas are like that as well. But you've also got cities that are really focused on a program youth participation experience. They may or may not really have a youth council, but they're really looking at what kind of program can we have, what kind of activity can we have, and there's some examples that kind of really blend in with Marv's examples of youth advisors to the funding activities, grant-making activities of community foundations. There are cities that are doing that same kind of activity. Hampton, Virginia, and Claremont, California are yet different kinds of youth participation. In Hampton, Virginia, they hire every year 2 youth planners who work in the city planning department. They're city employees. They work, I think, like from 3 to 5 every day, after school, so that there are young people on staff as the city planning department is going through any and all of its planning opportunities, so that they've got youth views right there built into the staff in terms of where to locate playgrounds, parks, recreation facilities, what they think of sidewalks, what they think of street placements, where housing developments. All of the jobs of the planning department have some impact upon them by these 2 youth planners.
There are a variety of ways that youth can get involved in their governments. In fact, many teenagers are looking for a way to get involved. One way to get involved is by speaking up about the issues that matter to you. For example, last year at Harrison High School, a student was tragically killed in a car accident in front of the entrance of the high school. 3 seniors took the initiative to install a traffic light there to prevent these kind of accidents from happening in the future. That light was installed before the next school year began. These are just a few examples of how teenagers are getting involved in their government to make their communities better and safer for everyone else.
And they have a youth master plan. Having a master plan is what most cities and towns have, but in most cases it's a master plan for physical space. It's where the house is going to be, where the office building's going to be, where the road's going to be, where the park's going to be. What's little known is that in most city master plans is also something called the human services element, which does look at what are the needs of the people in the community. Where are the people going to be? And are they going to be elderly? Are they going to be young? Are they going to need schools? Are they going to need parks? And so there is almost always a human services element in that master planning process. What Claremont did was to blow that human services element up real big, and so that they have a youth master plan, just like many communities would have a city master plan. Youth mapping, whereby youth go through the community and determine what its assets are in their eyes. What are the attributes of our community that we can use? It's been done successfully in small towns, smaller cities like Columbus, Indiana, as well as successfully done in New York and Baltimore and other large cities. So it's a replicable model where youth are in charge, generally going out in teams of 2 people and trying to find out where it is that youth could, what exists already that youth could consider a resource. Going in and mapping where all of the grocery stores and drugstores are and whether or not they're friendly to youth coming in or not. Looking at where all the parks and recreation facilities are and whether they're useful to youth or not, or accessible to youth or not. Open at the right hours. What about the library? It's interesting what comes up as being an asset for the youth to do the mapping. Instructive that in one community, the laundromat became a primary youth asset. Why? Because it was open 24 hours a day and was well lit, so that it was a safe place to go and talk with some other kids at almost any time of day. Now, you might not want to now construct 24-hour-a-day laundromats that are well lit in your community, but you can abstract from that you need a 24-hour-a-day well lit place. If that's what the youth are finding as a necessary asset in their community, and that's what they're gravitating toward, then it helps you to understand what they're seeing.
Many teenagers want a place to go to after school and on the weekends to have fun and be with their peers. And for some, while that may be an ice arena or a skating park or a large facility, many teenagers are just looking for a place to be safe and a place to call a home away from home. And I think that's one of the big things that a youth council can provide for their teenage constituency.
A lot of times we're asked, how can kids contribute to our community? Well, that question can be answered by probably going right to the kids and asking them. A lot of times what you'll see is young people will get involved, and in many different fashions. What kids can do is, by sitting on your boards and commissions, you may have a recreation and parks board that a young person could help make some decisions on what your community will look like for recreational needs for young people of today. I think kids contribute in a lot of ways. We had a youth program that kids helped to build the youth program. We have kids looking for safety all the time, and how can we best teach our kids and let them be the teachers to us on the ways that their community can be safe. We ask a lot of times our citizens of all ages, how can they contribute? I think the best thing to do is ask our young people. So what you need to do is go to those places where those kids hang out. Go to the recreational areas. Go to the schools. Go to the churches, the synagogues, the temples, whatever you have in your community. Look for those kids that are hanging out, and look for those kids who are natural leaders that other kids are following. And then ask them. It's important for all of us to contribute to the communities that we live in. By being involved in youth programs for the number of years that I have been now, I was asked to, in the 2-day conference, to share with them some models that are going around the country. And in my travels, I have found a lot of different models. So I'd like to share with you what is happening around the country, and there are a lot of models for you to look at. So hopefully you'll hear a model that might suit your needs in your community. When we got back from Denver, this was my bag of models. If you want to take a look at this stuff anytime today, you can. But these are models. And are any of them better than the others? I don't think so. I think whatever the model is, it works for your community. And I even get a little bit nervous when I go out and talk about our model of Farmington Hills, because what we were able to do here in Farmington Hills might be different than what even Birmingham can do or West Bloomfield could do. And when we were in Denver again, there was 300 people, 200 of them were kids from all walks of life, and their models were everywhere from a group fighting for the rights in prison and to eliminate prisons in a lot of ways, to groups that got together. There was a basketball group that started out just as a recreation program that turned out to be a whole voting movement. What they did is, as kids came through their program and started playing the sports end of it using basketball, every year they would have this big go to vote kind of thing, and it was a basketball tournament, and you played in it. At the end of it, you signed up to vote. So there was a model I thought was different that could be maybe used in the right community at the right time in the right place. But it's sort of like when we were trying to start ours here in Farmington Hills, we went out and there wasn't a lot out there to find, and there still isn't really a lot. We had very, very beginning stages, and John and I talked about that just a little bit ago, of where we're at. Sometimes you think, wow, these people are so far out there in front of you, we'll never even be able to catch up. Well, we're far from that. We are all at the very, very beginning. And then last year at Safes Harbor in Baltimore, we had another piece that we thought was really super neat. We joined up not only youth directors and people working with young kids, we also found another group, the mental health group out there. And this year, when we came back, we hooked up with the mental health agency here in Oakland County, one that we could hook up with. It was Healthy People, Healthy Oakland. And we did a prom gala last year. We did prom gala again this year. The name is sort of misleading. Prom gala is a 10-week course where kids learn all about the effects of drugs and alcohol. Then at the end of this 10-week course, we have a huge dance. We had 350 kids here at the Caustic Center. We hosted the dance on Saturday night. But over this 10 weeks, they take an hour class, plus they have another hour of performance that they do. We were at Summit Mall and Oakland Mall, and the kids went through this whole sort of a dress-up kind of affair, a fashion show for prom clothes, but then had a big party back here. So we've taken a lot of different pieces and hooked up with a lot of things that we've thought were smart to do. So the more you can learn, and I think, Ron, you said it well last night, we've taken a long time, we've taken even a long time to learn what we're doing. And I don't think it's ever going to not be, like you said last night, where we don't keep continuing to learn. But we have to put it into action. And that's what models are. Models are things already in action that you can borrow from and hopefully enhance what you're going to do. Last couple of years ago, really last year, when our program was at the point the kids are graduating from it, because they can go up to about 15, which means a 9th grader maybe beginning of 10th grade. But by 10th grade, they're not going to come back and hang around with 7th graders. It just doesn't work. Brian Farmer, our program supervisor, was gracious enough to lend his support and his expertise in coming in with us and saying, okay, if we're hearing from the high school kids, what are we going to do? And Brian's idea was to just start getting them together. We met at the Zap Zone. He got hooked up at the schools, and we went out there and we started pulling things together. And out of that came that piece that we showed last night in the Northwest Gazette, the teen page. Now we keep continuing to hopefully have that enhanced. So when you look at a model, make sure that there's parts of it that can fit into what you need in your community.
To get the word out and advertise what we're doing, what we're trying to set up, or what the issues are that we're doing right now, so that not only the youth and all the schools will know what's going on, but also the parents and other residents in the community.
Young people serving on boards and commissions for the first time need a basic understanding of parliamentary procedures. Coco Seaward, a professional registered parliamentarian who has extensive municipal government experience, spends some time going over the basics of how business is conducted during the meetings.
Brought you only one small piece of paper. That's all I'm offering. That's all you need. This flyer, as you'll notice at the top, is published by the National Association of Parliamentarians. Yes, there really is a national association of people who get together to train people on parliamentary procedure. And probably most of you don't know someone who's a parliamentarian. I'd be very surprised if you did. This is really all that you need. This is all that you can, that would have to have in order to learn to do the basics of parliamentary procedure for your club, for your middle school councils, for your clubs at high school, or anything else?
I think one of the most important things that we need to look at is the democracy that we have in this country. The passion that we have toward democracy could be considered very minimal compared to other countries. The youth around the world are trying so hard to get their voice through, and they die for it, while we have the right and we have the power to voice our opinion, but we don't do it. So it is, and I'm asking you and I'm urging you, it is our responsibility as youth to get involved. It is our responsibility to make a difference and use this great thing that our leaders have fought for during their struggle for our country. This is the United States of America. This is the freedom of speech. This is your freedom, and this is your democracy, and you could make a difference.
Recently, I met with the Honorable Dennis Archer, Mayor of the City of Detroit and the first Vice President of the National League of Cities, and George Goodman, Executive Director of the Michigan Municipal League. Both expressed their commitment to youth councils and to bringing young people into the decision-making process in local government.
Arlene Robinson, who is the head of our youth department, was sharing with me how excited our young people were to been privileged to participate, and how they interacted with young people who were also similarly situated in coming together under your leadership. I just thought it was outstanding on the basis of the report that I've received back.
Well, this year the National League of Cities theme is building bridges, and I can't think of a better way to build bridges than to connect them with young people. I think in the end the young people are probably going to build the bridges that last and have the vision that makes sense in the next century. I'm really proud of the participation of the Michigan Municipal League. You from the beginning sponsored the youth programs workshops. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Well, of course, the Michigan Municipal League, which is the state association of cities and villages here in Michigan and is quite active with the National League of Cities, has always been interested in young people and trying to work with our communities as they have set up programs for young people. And when the opportunity came along for us to get more involved, because the National League of Cities decided to really carve out a special niche for youth, I received a call because someone said that they thought they heard me talk about that at a session someplace, and so I volunteered and got involved, and have actually served on a couple of different task forces that NLC has established, and have tried to bring those ideas back to Michigan. We were one of the 4 state leagues that had one of the AmeriCorps Promise fellows assigned to our office, and that individual, well, we've had 2 actually, and we have been working with a variety of our communities trying to share information from both the NLC perspective, but also really sharing information back and forth between communities as to what various communities are doing in terms of broadening and strengthening and establishing various unique roles for young people.
When you, next year at the National League of Cities, when you begin to invest in communities, is this one of the ways you're going to invest is in the young people?
Well, let me just simply suggest that the short answer is yes, but it won't be creating anything new. We'll be building upon that which has been started. As I recall, our first major effort as a National League of Cities, George, correct me if I'm wrong, is when we went to Kansas City, Missouri.
Yes.
And Mayor Emanuel Cleaver had a major program before all the delegates who were there, based upon his interaction with young people. And we had a number of young people who came from Michigan at the time, and the majority, it seemed to me, came from Farmington Hills. And they participated in that discussion, and I think we all learned a great deal because Mayor Cleaver sort of acted as the facilitator or the moderator. But I think if you really want to learn from young people, you have to seek them out on either you provide the forum where they all come together collegially, or you go to where they are. And then you've got to ask the questions, and then you've got to be willing to listen. But we really should listen to our young people. We do not have our young people participating in the very basic, elementary form of government, and that's voting. I mean, the age between ages of 18 and 35, our young people are, I think, the most critical and have some very good ideas as to how to change what they don't like, but they don't participate in the voting process. They're quick to give their opinion when asked, of course, and sometimes when not asked, about what we're doing, what we're not doing. But when you don't vote, you don't count, because that's where you really get involved in the participation. And I sort of suspect that we need to reach out and do a much better job than what we're doing.
I hope this video has helped you to begin exploring the possibility of establishing a youth advisory council in your community. The entire structure is now in place for youth councils to prosper and grow across the country. The National League of Cities has organized at the national level by forming the Institute for Youth Education and Families. For additional information and assistance, including best practices kits available to local units of government, contact John Kyle or Cliff Johnson at the National League of Cities at 202-626-3039. The Michigan Municipal League also offers outstanding information on their website, or you can call them at 734-662-3246. In addition, the Michigan Municipal League is supporting the efforts of local governments by offering numerous articles in their publications and by adding youth tracks to their conferences. I would also be happy to share additional information with you and to discuss the progress of the 2020 Perfect Vision Project in Farmington Hills. Please contact me in Farmington Hills at the City Hall. In many communities, youth councils are all ready to assume the responsibility of youth leadership, while in other cities they are just beginning to form. These youth leaders are the role models we want for our young people, not the negative picture too often portrayed in the media. These youth will be the leaders in the year 2020. Youth councils are 2020 Perfect Vision in the making.